Despite the failure of the revolutions of the 1830s, it was in this decade that the Risorgimento began to make some progress. This was due above all to the work of a dedicated revolutionary intellectual, Giuseppe Mazzini, dubbed by Metternich the most dangerous man in Europe. The key question you will answer for part one is, how important a figure was Mazzini in the movement for Italian unification? Giuseppe Mazzini was born in Genoa in 1805. He became a nationalist after seeing Piedmontese refugee revolutionaries begging in the streets. He studied medicine and then law. Later he joined the Carbonari but was betrayed in 1830. While imprisoned, he decided he must work for an independent and unified Italy. Mazzini was a highly controversial figure. His radical approach led his political enemies to criticize him as an enemy of Italy and a terrorist, and at the same time as an impractical dreamer. Yet his supporters described him as the greatest, bravest, most heroic of Italians, and as a profound thinker. Historians' verdicts, too, have differed widely, partly because his thinking was complex and evolved over a long period, and partly because, as an exile, often under sentence of death, he often destroyed his letters. Those that survived were written in a handwriting so tiny that it served as a secret code. What is certain, however, is that he is a key figure in the history of Italian unification. It is not easy to fully understand Mazzini's thoughts, and few thinkers have been so misunderstood. Nevertheless, Dennis Mack Smith wrote a superb biography in 1994 and has provided a convincing analysis of his ideas. Mazzini insisted that he had one overriding aim, and that was the Brotherhood of People. He believed in the equality of human beings and of races. He had a contempt for xenophobia and imperialism. Yet, Mazzini believed that the next stage of the world's history would be domination by nations. The political map had to be redrawn so that distinct people could occupy their own nation states. This stress on nationalism led Karl Marx to dismiss Mazzini as that everlasting old ass. But Marx fatally underestimated the importance of national allegiances, so in Mazzini's mind, Italy had to be united. Mazzini did not want a federal Italy, one where states were self-governing in their internal affairs. He thought that would lead to the retainment of old foreign rulers. Instead, the whole peninsula should be independent with one central government and locally elected authorities. There should be democracy and the guarantee of individual rights. Mazzini also believed that Italy should be unified by its own efforts. He wanted to avoid help from France, as that might merely replace one form of outside domination by another. The ideal was also that there should be unification from below. The people should rise up against their oppressors. But if monarchs were prepared to fight against Austrian domination, they should be supported. He was not absolutely committed to republicanism. That was merely his ideal. Socially, he wanted greater equality with an end to poverty and with taxation being proportional to wealth. There should be free and compulsory education for all, and women's rights should be guaranteed. Mazzini's ideas constitute a remarkably modern agenda and a remarkably radical one in the 19th century. No wonder moderate liberals in the 1840s looked upon him as dangerous. How could they attract the support of France while he called for all foreign nations to stand aside from Italian affairs? How could they generate support from wealthy figures while he wished to see a redistribution of wealth? How could they appeal to individual Italian rulers while his ideal was republicanism? Mazzini might on occasions appeal for the support of particular rulers, But his ambivalence of his thought on this issue must surely have made them weary. In the end, Italy was unified, as Mazzini said it would be, and nationalism did indeed prove a potent force in the 19th and 20th century history. Furthermore, Mazzini's ideas inspired many disciples, yet history did not follow the exact pattern he hoped. As we shall see, Italy came to be unified more from above than from below, much to his disgust. He was to describe the new Italian unified state as a dead corpse. Some may judge that an Italy unified on Mazzinian lines would have been a more liberal, progressive, and altogether preferable state to the one that did emerge. Others will think that such a state is pure fantasy. Mazzini was not merely a thinker, he aspired also to be a doer. When Charles Albert finally became king of Piedmont in 1831, Mazzini wrote to him about the coming revolution and invited him to become its leader. Put yourself at the head of the nation. Write on your banner, Union, Liberty, Independence. Give your name to a century. He added privately, not that I have any hopes of him, and he was right. No reply came from Charles Albert. Shortly afterward, Mazzini tried other tactics. Later in 1831, dissatisfied with the limited progress brought about by the secret societies, he founded an organization with much clearer objectives. Young Italy has been called Italy's first real political party. Mazzini described the new party in these words: Young Italy is a brotherhood of Italians who believe in a law of progress and duty and are convinced that Italy is destined to become one nation. They join with the intention of remaking Italy as one independent nation of freemen and equals. Those who joined had to swear to work to make Italy one free, independent, republican nation. Members would campaign peacefully and attempt to convince others of their views, but Mazzini also accepted that on occasion, violent tactics might be necessary. Soon, Mazzini and Young Italy were involved in various attempts to further the cause of unification. There was a plan for an uprising in Naples in 1832 on the assumption that the peasants were a volcano about to erupt. They also organized a mutiny in the Piedmontese army and a rising in Savoy and an attempted coup in Piedmont, for which, in his absence, Mazzini was condemned to death. None of these, however, came anywhere near to success. Their main effect was probably to allow Mazzini's political enemies to spread scare stories. Metternich, for instance, insisted, quite inaccurately, that he was trying to assassinate Charles Albert. Mazzini clearly inspired Italian nationalism. No one else campaigned for so long or so tirelessly in their cause of a united Italy. He spent most of his time organizing a propaganda campaign to convince Italians to support the creation of a democratic self-governing state of Italy. It is thus as an inspirational prophet that Mazzini's true significance lies, although he does have two other claims to fame. His two other claims to fame are as such: he converted many to his cause. Easily the most important of his recruits was Garibaldi, who involved himself in a proposed Mazzini revolt in Genoa in 1831. The scheme failed, but Garibaldi escaped before his trial and was sentenced to death in his absence. He recalled of Mazzini that he alone was awake when all around were slumbering. Mazzini, whom many considered an impractical dreamer, became in effect President of Rome in 1849, and in this position he showed highly constructive abilities. Mazzini's major weakness was that his ideas were too intellectual for most people to grasp, and they were certainly too radical for the most cautious middle-class reformers. He was also absent from Italy for such long periods, totaling in all over 40 years, that he became out of touch with the situation, exaggerating the development of national identity among the bulk of Italians. It is untrue that he failed to appreciate the revolutionary potential of the peasants, but it must be admitted that he knew relatively little about them and had even less contact with them. And here's a chart with Mazzini's thoughts and actions. In terms of what he believed in national unity, revolution from below, republicanism, and social reforms. In terms of action, he created Young Italy. He had many disciples and followers, including Garibaldi. He did attempt some coups, and his last coup is very successful in that he becomes president of the Roman Republic for 1 year. Part two's key question is, what strategies other than Mazzini's existed in Italy at this time? Mazzini was not the only revolutionary leader, and ideas very different from his were circling among the educated elite. Two strategies focused on Piedmont and on the Pope. In Piedmont, moderate nationalists, taking their lead from Cesare Balboa, proposed that their state should lead the other Italian states in an attempt to drive out the Austrians. They argued that only Piedmont was strong enough to reclaim Lombardy and Venetia from the Austrians and rally the other Italian states into some sort of union. Proposals were put forward that Charles Albert should be the future king of a united Italy, although some believed that this new state should only cover the northern half rather than the whole of the peninsula. Another possible leader was suggested by the Piedmontese writer Gioberti. In 1843, he suggested that, as the Pope and the Catholic Church were the glories of Italy, the Italian states should form themselves into a federation with the Pope as its president. His book on the moral and civil primacy of the Italians sold 5,000 copies. But the bad reputation of the Papal States as oppressive and corrupt seemed too great a stumbling block for his ideas to be put into operation. However, the situation changed in 1846 with the election of a new Pope, Pius IX, who was believed to have liberal sympathies. Many were astounded that such a figure had been elected. "We were prepared for anything," said Metternich, "except a liberal Pope." Pius IX was a man of personal piety and deep faith, but he was also emotional, excitable, and had a quick temper. He was seen by many who knew him as impressionable, impulsive, and unpredictable. Pius said of himself in a letter to a previous pope that, owing to his epilepsy, he had a very weak memory and could not concentrate on a subject for any length of time without having to worry about his ideas getting terribly confused. He was very easily influenced by stronger personalities and was described by the British ambassador in 1860 as having an amiable but weak mind. Pius IX's reputation for liberalism seemed fully justified in 1846 to 47. He freed 2,000 political prisoners, mostly revolutionaries. He reformed education, the law, and papal administration, and he gave laymen a greater share in public affairs. He also ended press censorship, allowed Jews out of the ghetto, granted Rome a constitution to replace absolute papal rule, and created the Consulta, an elected body to advise the Pope. Here, it seemed, was the figure that Gioberti and other nationalists had hoped for. His rapid transformation into an enemy of Italian nationalism, which was a profound blow to liberals in Italy, is extremely hard to understand. In the end, Pius is remembered today for the length of his reign and for his firm stand on Catholic doctrine. and for his amazing transformation on the issue of Italian unification. The man who initially seemed to be a liberal turned out to be a reactionary.